Didn't make it to church? That's okay. I've got a word for you. Welcome back to Christ Culture, the podcast. I'm Calvin, and I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for listening and for watching. For all your support, it's greatly appreciated. Hey, listen, like, comment, and subscribe on everything on all of our platforms, and send this to somebody else so that they can listen and watch as well. But I want to go ahead and get right into the word for today, and I want to call this one Keep Digging. Keep Digging. And I want to start by first talking about a TV show that my father and I used to watch called Gold Rush. Now, I don't know if you've seen this show before, but the whole premise of the show is they're digging in the ground and they're trying to find gold. Now, some of them have one or two people on their team trying to find gold. Some of them have huge enterprises with all types of machinery and employees, and they're digging in the ground trying to find gold. But the whole point is to get in the ground, strike it rich, and live your life from there. But the thing that always brought us back to the show was the allure of something that they called bedrock. Now, bedrock is if you're digging in the right place and you dig down far enough, you hit a spot where there supposedly would be huge deposits of gold at this layer of the earth. And they always talked about bedrock and hitting bedrock. And if they were digging in the right hole and digging in the right spot, they could get down there and they could strike it rich. And I want to talk about that in the context of our own lives because I think we're digging holes in a lot of different areas in our own lives. And one of the questions that we often run into is, should I keep digging? Should I keep going? Or should I stop? Is digging this hole actually digging my own grave, or should I continue to push through until I strike gold? Now, that could be in any area of your life, maybe a relationship. Maybe you've been with somebody or you're in a new relationship and you're pushing, you're trying to make things work and you continue to work at it. And you're wondering, should I keep digging or am I digging my own grave here? Or maybe you're trying to start a business and you have all these obstacles that you're trying to get over. And you're like, should I just keep pushing, or am I digging in the wrong area? Should I be doing something else? And so I think this is the perfect analogy to kind of talk about any situation that you may be dealing with in your own life and whether or not you should keep digging. And so when I was thinking about this, I came across a passage in Genesis, and you can read through the entire story on your own time, but it was about Isaac and his servants, and they were digging all of these holes and they were trying to find water essentially. And sometimes the enemy would come back and they would fill the hole again, and then they would have to dig it back out. But Isaac was trying to find a good spot to dig a hole so that they could have water. And they kept digging, and they would dig this hole and they would dig another hole, and they just kept digging. And I read through this, and there were a couple things in there that I thought maybe we could use in our own lives in order to discern or determine whether or not we should keep digging in whatever area it is in your life. So the first thing that I came across that I want to point out to you is this question. And I want you to think about this, whatever you're thinking in your head right now, whatever that situation is, because I know you got one. Think about this question first. Did God tell you to dig there? Now, in the story in the Bible, he told Isaac to go to this certain place. So Isaac kind of knew he was in the right area. He just had to find the right area to dig this hole where it would last and where the enemy wouldn't come along and destroy it. But he kind of knew he was in the right area because he went where God sent him to, the land where God sent him to. And that's the question we have to ask ourselves is, did God send you to this area where you are digging? Does God want you to be there digging? And you have to ask yourself that question so you know whether or not you should move on from the hole that you're digging or not. And we should always trust God. One of the things that I was looking at in the news recently was over in Egypt, they were looking at the pyramids, and they had this new technology where basically they could scan the area, and they scanned the area and they realized that the pyramids were just the top of whatever these structures were. They actually found more structure underground that you can't see with the naked eye. And this made me think about this analogy with God. The reason we should dig into places that God tells us to is because God can see what's beneath the ground. So here we are trying to strike at gold, trying to make sure we're digging in the right spot so we can hit bedrock and find those gold deposits and hit that place in life that we want to be. That's why we should trust God, because he can already see what's underneath the ground. So he can tell us what area we should be digging in. So don't get so caught up in your own, own decisions and things in your life about what it is that you want, your fleshly desires. But think about, what areas is God telling me to dig in? What area is God sending me to? And that's where I need to be digging. The next thing I extracted from the story that I thought would be nice to share is this question. And I want you to think about this. What is your motivation for digging? And this is a big one because oftentimes our motivations are selfish. We're only thinking about ourselves when it comes to digging these holes. And that cannot be the case. Your motivations cannot be selfish. So you have to ask yourself when it comes to that relationship, am I digging here just because I'm attracted to this person? That's why I continue to try to make this relationship work. Am I digging here just because I'm lonely? That's why I keep trying to make it work. Am I just trying to strike it rich? That's why I'm posting on TikTok and YouTube. Is that my whole motivation? I'm just trying to strike it rich because I've seen other people do it, and that's my motivation. I'm not trying to do anything other than that. It's selfish. So you have to ask yourself, what is my motivation for doing this? What is my why? I'm sure you've heard that before. What's your why? What's your reasoning for continuing to push in whatever area of your life that you're pushing in? What's your motivation? I don't know if you remember the movie Holes or not, where they had the kids digging all the different holes. It was kind of like um, a prison thing that they had going on, or juvenile detention, where they had these kids digging these holes. And the motivation for the leaders of this camp was they were trying to find a mythical treasure that was buried out in this area. And they had the kids digging the holes, but they could never find this treasure. And I believe that part of that reason is because their motivations were wrong. And you have to ask yourself this question: why would God allow you to find that treasure, hit that gold in the ground, if your motivations are wrong? Because then when you find it and you strike at the gold and you get that gold, you're not going to be a good steward over it. And in the movie, Stanley comes along and his motivations are different. He's trying to help his friend Zero. He's trying to help his family. And eventually he finds the gold. So just make sure your motivations are correct when you're digging these holes, these figurative holes in your life, and you're pushing towards things. Make sure your motivations are in the right spot. And then the last thing that I want you to kind of examine is this. And this one is one that hits home for me personally. And that is, when you are digging these holes, ask yourself this question: does the enemy keep pushing dirt back in the hole? Because if so, that could be an indication that you're digging in the right place. And here's what I mean by that. The enemy doesn't want you to hit that bedrock and strike that gold and get to a good place. So oftentimes the enemy will do things and bring up obstacles in your life to push dirt back in that hole, not because the enemy can actually stop you from reaching the gold, but it is a deterrent to try to get you to stop digging so that you never reach that place. And so ask yourself this question: when I'm moving towards what I'm trying to move towards and I'm pushing through, does it seem like every time I make a little progress, something happens to stall me, or something happens to create a setback in my life? Am I trying to start this business, and every time I feel like I'm almost there, something comes along and I've done something wrong? There's another fee I have to pay. There's something else I have to do before I can start this business. Does it seem like dirt keeps getting pushed into the hole? And if so, that could be an indication that you are digging in the right spot. So make sure you ask yourself all of these things when it comes to digging those holes in your life, and you're trying to determine whether or not I should keep pushing until I strike gold, or whether or not I should stop and dig elsewhere. And I want to share this with you real quick, a story of my life back during COVID, actually. So I was living in Virginia at the time, and then COVID hit at the beginning of the year. And right around, I want to say April or May, I decided I was going to move from Virginia, move back to Michigan, close to my family during the pandemic so I can be there with them. So I get to Michigan and I'm there and I'm working a job, and I'm working for about 3 months. I'm working from home. Everything's going fine. I've got my own place. And I get a phone call from my dad, and my dad says, "Hey, I need you to come work for me." So during the pandemic, my dad started doing different construction projects on his own, and eventually started to kind of turn into a business. So he called me one day, was like, "Hey, I need you to come help me start this business and run this business." So I leave my job and I go and start working there, and I'm helping manage the new company there. And throughout those first months, it was difficult, to say the least. There were so many things that we didn't know, and we had to learn, so many learning curves. There were some projects we would work a project for a week or more, and we would pay out the employees that we had, and we would pay for all the expenses, and him and I would go home with virtually no money. And there were so many times, during that period where I could have easily said, "Hey, I don't want to keep digging here. This hole doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It doesn't seem to be any gold at the bottom of this hole. Let me go back to corporate America. Let me go back to working my job. Let me do something different. This is not working." But for whatever reason, me and my father kept digging. We knew that there was something there. We knew that we had something, and we kept digging and we kept pushing every single day. And eventually, we got to a place where we began to make money and bring money in, and we figured out all the nuances of the business, and we were able to kind of build a successful business. And that was because we decided to keep digging. And that's what you have to determine in your life. If you should keep digging in those areas. And I know for myself, when I was going through that, I knew that God had called me to that place and told me to dig there because it was mending the relationship between me and my father. So God had a whole nother plan in the midst of that. And I know my motivation was correct because I was doing it to help my father, and I was doing it so that he and I could be closer and kind of build a business for the family together. And then lastly, I knew that the enemy kept pushing dirt back into the hole because it seemed like every time we made a little progress, something else came up. And so I asked myself those same three things during that period. And that's how I was able to determine that I needed to keep digging. So I hope this helps you. I hope this message hits you in some way and that you can determine whether or not you should keep digging. And I want to hear your testimonies about when you strike gold in your life in whatever area that is. All right, let's go ahead and get into some questions for today. First question: what keeps you going when your efforts feel pointless or unnoticed? The thing that keeps you going is remembering the bigger picture, right? Think about the human eye. It's hard to perceive small changes. So let's say, for example, somebody came out in front of you with a full outfit on, right? And then they went into the room and they changed one small thing, maybe a necklace, maybe an earring, and they come back out. If you just quickly glance at them, you're not going to really see a change. But if they went in that room and they came back out and their outfit was entirely different, you would see that change. And a lot of times when we're going through things, change goes unnoticed, and all of those efforts go unnoticed because the change is not dramatic on a daily basis. It's incremental, it's small. And what you have to remember from your perspective is it's all of those small incremental changes that are going to add up to that dramatic change that you're looking for, that are going to get you to that ultimate place that you are trying to be. And you have to remember that for yourself. And so don't worry about going unnoticed by others, because truth of the matter is they're probably not going to acknowledge it until they see some dramatic change on the other side. And you have to remember that for yourself and just keep pushing and keep taking those little small incremental changes and acknowledge yourself for your efforts because you know that change is actually happening. Let's see here. Next question. How important is community when you're in a dig deep season? I would say community is always very important. It's always to have wise counsel around you, those people who love you around you. But what I want to talk about right now is there will be seasons in your life where you are digging alone. You're going to find yourself digging certain holes in your life, and you're going to have to remind yourself and have faith in what God told you and keep digging that hole. You might have people that love you and community on the outside of that hole, but you might be so deep down there that they can't even see you and you can't even see them. And the only thing you're going to have to go off of is what God told you. And that's what's going to have to keep pushing you to keep digging and to keep moving forward. That's why I always talk about how faith cometh by hearing. Because you might be so deep in that hole, the only thing that you can hear is the sound of your shovel. You can't even see anything. And so you're going to have to trust what you're hearing, keep swinging that shovel, and eventually you're going to hear that shovel hit something that is solid and know that you struck gold. So in those seasons, although it's important to have community, you may find those seasons where you're alone without that community, and you're going to just have to trust what God told you and keep on digging. One more question here. When do you lean into discipline and when do you give yourself grace? That is a really good question. Here's what I'll say. You should give yourself grace as much as you need to. But the key word here is need to. The thing that we often do is we take grace and we abuse it. So grace is God's unmerited favor, right? And let's just say, for example, let's go back to the losing weight analogy here. Say you're trying to lose weight and you're doing good for a full week and you're eating right and you're exercising, and then you have a weekend where you fall off and you eat some things you should eat and maybe you don't exercise like you should. You can give yourself grace there. You should give yourself grace and say, hey, you know what? I didn't do everything that I was supposed to do this weekend, but I'm going to get back up on Monday. I'm going to get back to it. That's giving yourself grace. It's there when you need it. But the issue is when you begin to abuse it. And the reason that's an issue is because you're only harming yourself when you do that. You're only prolonging your blessings in your progress when you do this. So if you continue to do that and you continue to eat bad and say, well, I'll just give myself grace. I'll give myself grace. Okay, but you're not going to reach your goals because you keep abusing this grace. And we do the same thing with God, so that we can do the things that we want to do. And then we come back and we say, oh, God, forgive me. And God, give me grace in this season. But we continue to abuse that. And then we wonder why our blessings are delayed and we're not receiving our blessings. It's because of your own actions. We use grace as the get out of jail free card instead of using it when we truly need it, when we truly fall out, for when we truly make a mistake. Welcome to this segment called The Perfect Brew, where we try to create the perfect brew just for you, just like that perfect drink that you go and buy for yourself, a tailored response to exactly what it is that you are dealing with in your own life. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read today's order. It says, I'm 29 and I've had the same best friend since high school. We've been through so much together, but lately it feels like we've grown apart. I'm always reaching out and trying to plan things, but either she cancels or she seems like she's not interested. I know people can change and I don't want to be dramatic, but I feel like it might be time to let go. How do I bring this up without making it awkward or ruining the friendship? The first thing that I'm going to say to you is pray. And here's why I say pray. Pray that if something has happened between you two that maybe you're not aware of, that is causing her to act this way, that God will reveal that to you and provide an opportunity for you to mend the friendship. If that's what's going on and maybe she's upset about something that you're not aware of, ask God to show that to you and to provide that opportunity so that you can move forward in that area. The next thing that I'm going to say to you in the scripture that I'm hearing is there's a scripture in Samuel where God is talking to Samuel about the new king, and he's asking him, how long are you going to mourn the old king? I know that was your friend, and I know that you knew him and that you anointed him, but I have a new king, and how long are you going to mourn the old one? In other words, how long are you going to stay there dwelling on that when I have something better for you? And here's what I want you to know. Sometimes in life, God has doors that he wants us to go through that another person won't fit through that door with you. And you can't take everybody with you into the next season that God has for you. So it may just be that season of your life with that individual being your best friend and being that close with you and doing everything with you, that season may be up, and that's okay. You can mourn for a season, but be prepared to move forward in your life and celebrate those times you have with that individual. Even though it's not the same and it may not be the same moving forward, that's okay. Mourn and then move on and be open to whatever God has for you next. So that's the advice that I would give you. And I hope this was the perfect brew just for you. Hey, if you want to be featured on this segment and you want some advice, just send us a DM or leave a comment, send us an email. We will feature you on this segment. And let's go ahead and get into our Christ Culture Staple SOS. It's that time for our Christ Culture Staple SOS, that is subject on the spot, where I am given 60 seconds and a random subject, and I will have to come up with a little sermon or mini sermon on it. So I'm going to pull up an app that will give us a random topic. And today's topic is hurricanes. So let me pull up our timer here so that we can get started. And we will start in 3, 2, 1, go. Hurricanes are a very destructive force. Hurricanes have wind velocity that can knock you over. They can knock over buildings and cause a lot of damage. But at the center of a hurricane, there is what they call the eye of the storm. And at the eye of the storm, it is virtually calm. If you were standing there, you may not even know that you were standing in the center of a storm. And I think about this eye of the storm like God. God can bring you that peace that surpasses all understanding when everything around you is chaotic and everything around you seems to be going bad and be destructive. God can bring you that peace. And I think that if we seek God, even when we are in those storms, he can bring us that peace and he can bring a calmness to whatever storm that we are in. So push through those winds, push through those rains, get to the center of that storm and call on God so that he can bring you that peace and he can calm that storm. And he will be there right in the midst of it with you. And just like that, another episode is in the books. I want to thank you all for watching and listening. It means the absolute world. Hey, make sure you send this to a friend right now so that they can listen as well. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you next week, same time, same place.